We are quickly approaching the start of the 2024 F1 season, and that means it's my favorite time of the year, predictions. I will say I have taken some pretty big swings this year, so I'm very curious to see how they'll go. As I did in 2022 and 2023, I will be giving my predictions for the Constructors Championship, the Drivers' Championship, and then 3 hot takes for things that I think will happen during the season. I am going to start off with my drivers' predictions. And this is my first big swing. Not because of the driver that I have in this position, but because this position that I am guessing is P21. Because I think that someone's going to get replaced mid-season. So in P21, I have Kevin Magnussen. The biggest reason for this is I just think that the Haas is probably going to be the weakest car. Without Gunther there, I think they're going to be lacking a direction, and I also just don't have faith that they will ever be able to figure out why their tires constantly degrade during races. This has been a problem for them for many years, longer than this current set of regulations, and so I think without a good car, I don't think Kevin is going to be able to do anything. In P20, I have Zhou Guanyu. Similarly, I just think that what are we calling it now? The stake? The stake F1 cars, I don't have any faith that they have managed to figure anything out. I think they're all just preparing for the Audi years, and I think this is just going to be a very mediocre team for the next 2 years. In P19, I have Nico Hülkenberg. I think similarly to last year, he's going to qualify quite well on occasion, but just like K-Mag, I think the tire wear is going to kill that car, and he's just not going to get very many points. In P18, I actually have Logan Sargent. I think that the Williams car will be kind of at a similar level as it was to 2023, and I think with the amount of experience he was able to get in his first year, I do think that he'll be better prepared for the pressures of F1 and be able to be closer to Albon in terms of pace. I think his biggest issue in 2023 was that he was never able to put a full weekend together, and I think he was just making mistakes because he was putting too much pressure on himself. But now that he's been given this second season, I think he'll have calmed down a little bit, and if he can get off to a better start, I think he'll have more confidence and be able to get some points finishes. In P17, I have Valtteri Bottas. For me, I think that car is just not good, but Valtteri still manages to have a couple decent results a year, even with a car like that. And I think he'll probably get the most points of the season at Bahrain, because that always seems to be a track that he's good at and able to get a lot of points out of. It might be one of the only times in 2024 that Valtteri gets any points, so but it might be enough to keep him ahead of the bottom feeders. In P16, I have Alex Albon. I think he is going to do a little bit worse this coming year than he did in 2023, mainly because I think a lot more teams are going to figure things out and get ahead of Williams, and so I think there will be less opportunities for them to get points. And I also think that teams are going to have caught on to Williams' strategy of going long on the tires in order to keep a train of cars behind them, and so I don't think that will work as well as it did in 2023. Now, in P15, this is what I hinted at earlier, and I have Liam Lawson. I think that he will get into one of those AlphaTauri seats by the middle of the year, and I think for this reason he will end up on the top 21 drivers. This is a bit of a swing because it could not happen, and then my predictions will be totally ruined, but if it does land, I'm gonna look like a genius. So we're leaving him in at P15. In P14, I have Esteban Ocon. I do not have faith in that Alpine team. They have been going nowhere for years, and I think Esteban is going to be too focused on beating Gasly to really optimize the points that he can get in that car. P13, I have Lance Stroll. I think that the Aston Martin will not be as strong as it was in 2023, and for this reason it's going to be a lot tougher for him to get points. And especially since Lance struggles in qualifying, it's tough for him to make up enough positions in the race to get into the points. And so unless he is able to figure out qualifying in that car, I think it's going to be a tough time for him, and he's not going to get nearly as many points as Alonso, just as he did in 2023. In P12, I have Pierre Gasly. The biggest reason I have him ahead of Ocon is I think he is the stronger qualifier, and so I think he will be able to hang on enough times to get more points than Esteban. And I also think that Pierre seems content with being in Alpine, and I think will be much more team focused as opposed to Esteban, who can sometimes be a little bit more selfish than other drivers on the grid. In P11, I have Yuki Tsunoda. I think that the Racing Bull will be a much better car than it was in 2023, and so I have faith that Yuki will be able to get a lot out of that car and finish in the points a lot more often than he did in 2023. Now, this will either go over very, very well, or it could be the end of my predictions. But in P10, I have Sergio Perez, because I think that he is going to be replaced by Daniel Ricciardo midway through the season. I think he will get enough points within those first few races to stay in the top 10 for the season, but I don't have faith that he's going to stay in that seat all year, mainly because I think other teams are going to be closer to Red Bull this year, and with his poor qualifying, it's going to be a lot tougher for him to be close to Max. He's going to have a lot more positions to make up in the race if he's constantly being knocked out in Q2. So I think Red Bull will realize that their Constructors Championship is at risk, and they will have to replace Checo for Daniel. In P9, I have Fernando Alonso. I think Fernando is an extremely powerful driver, no matter the car he's given, but I just see Aston Martin dropping back. I didn't see enough from them developing that car in 2023 for me to have him any higher than this. In P8, I have George Russell. Yes, this might be a bit of a shock, but I don't have as much faith in Mercedes as everyone else seems to. You will see where I place them in my constructors in a little bit, but I think George really struggled in 2023, and I'm just worried that he is going to butt heads with Lewis a bit too much and distract himself from driving well. And so I think he's going to finish P8. In P7, I have Daniel Ricciardo. Yeah, this is all dependent on him getting Checo's seat in the Red Bull, but I think it is definitely possible. And I think it is especially possible if that Racing Bulls car is good. And even if it is good, he might do well enough to finish quite high up in the standings. I don't think he would get to P7 in a Racing Bull, but I think if he has a portion of the year in that Red Bull, I think he should be able to gain quite a few positions. In P6, I have Carlos Sainz. I think that with the Ferrari being developed more in Charles's direction, it's going to be tough for Carlos to keep up with him. We saw that when the car was beginning to be developed more in Charles's direction, at the end of the year, that was when Carlos started to struggle. Whereas when the car was initially in more of a place that Carlos liked, Charles struggled. So I think with them moving towards more and more towards what Charles likes, I think that's going to make it harder and harder for Carlos to succeed in that car, unfortunately. In P5, I have Oscar Piastri. I think that he has proven himself to be a very strong driver, and I have faith that that McLaren car is going to be very good in 2024, but I just think that his issues with tire management are still going to linger, and so it's going to be tough for him to break into a higher position than this. In P4, I have Lewis Hamilton. Honestly, I just can't see Lewis finishing much lower than this. He's just way too consistent of a driver, and even if the Mercedes isn't that great, I still have faith that he'll be able to get as much as he can out of it. In P3, I have Charles Leclerc. I think that once again, the Ferrari will prove to be a decent car at some tracks that will maybe be able to compete with Red Bull. But once again, I think Ferrari shenanigans, reliability, and the once-a-year bottle job that Charles tends to have, I think that will mean that he will finish a little bit lower than the top two drivers. In P2, I have Lando Norris. I think he did just about everything except for win a race in 2023. And if that McLaren car is as good as McLaren are hinting that it will be, I think he will be able to do a lot of good things with it. And so I think he will be Max's stiffest competition for 2024. Because in P1, I once again have Max Verstappen winning the championship. I am hoping and praying and pleading to the F1 gods that it is at least more of a competition in 2024, but at this moment, I just think that Max and Red Bull are too powerful of a combination to be beaten. I think it will be closer, but I do think that he will still come out on top. So that was my drivers' predictions. So now we will move on to constructors, which I will try and be a little bit more brief with since I think there was a bunch of spoilers in how I had rated the drivers there. So in P10, I have Haas. I just think that they seem to be going backwards and nothing about this team really excites me at the moment. And they got rid of the one good thing about that team, even though I do think it was overdue. In P9, I have Stake, which is also a team that is just going nowhere. The car just isn't quick enough, and they might get lucky with the odd points finish, but I just don't see them doing anything special until they become Audi. In P8, I have Williams. I see them dropping a position from 2023, and I think this is more so to do with the fact that other teams will get stronger rather than them getting any weaker, but I think it will be harder for them to finish in the points in 2024. In P7, I have Alpine. As I said earlier, I just have no faith in the French team. I don't see a direction. I don't see any passion there. Any of their really good technical staff has moved on. No one seems to want to stick around. Drivers don't stick around. Management doesn't stick around. Team principals don't stick around. And so there's nothing that gives me faith in that team. Even with the celebrity investment going on, it's just, they constantly are making new plans and then changing the plans 2 years in when everything in F1 requires a lot of time to get anywhere. And so they're just too impatient and a mess, a dumpster fire, a disaster. Alpine. In P6, I have Aston Martin. The main reason for this is Lance Stroll. I think Alonso will probably get 75% of the points for the team in 2024, and I just lost a bit of faith in them as the year went on because they weren't able to develop the car very well, and so I don't know if they fully understood the concept that they went with, especially since when they brought the upgrade, it didn't improve the car and the car actually got worse. And so there isn't any signs there that they're going to improve. The team I have in P5, on the other hand, which is Racing Bulls, we started to see at the end of 2023 them understanding their car concept and the fact that they will be using a lot of Red Bull parts in 2024. I have faith that they will improve up the lineup, but they were definitely the hardest one for me to place because I feel like they could finish much higher than this, but they could also finish much lower. And so I'm hedging my bets and going with P5, but it was very close between them and Aston Martin for me. Now, the team I have in P4, I feel like will be a little bit in no man's land. I think they will be a little bit behind the two teams ahead of them, but a huge gap to Racing Bulls behind them. And that is Mercedes. As I said earlier, I have much less faith in this team than everyone else seems to. The reason why I have them here is that they never seem to figure anything out with their car concept. And even though they are going to be going a different direction in 2024, I think other teams have had so much more learning with their concepts that I think Mercedes are going to be taking a big step back to start the year as they learn their new car and how to set it up. And so I think the fact that they will take a bit to get going, they will lose out on a lot of points that the other teams around them will be able to get, and I don't think they will ever be able to make that up throughout the year. I do think by the end of the year they'll be good, but I think at the start of the year they will be behind a lot of the other teams, and so I think it'll be hard for them to catch that up throughout the year. So that is my theory with Mercedes. James Allison could prove me very wrong and come out with a great car concept, but I don't know, I've put too much faith in Mercedes's aerodynamics team the last 2 years and they've really let me down. And since Mercedes have lost their engine advantage, I don't see it for 2024, and I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't. So this could either go very well for me or I could look like an idiot on the internet. So we'll see at the end of the year which one it ends up being. Now in P3, I have Ferrari. Ferrari is a team that constantly bites me in the ass. They constantly bite everyone in the ass because you think they're going to be good, and every single year they let you down with bad strategy, driver mistakes, and cars that blow up. It's a risk to have them ahead of Mercedes for sure, because Mercedes operationally is much better. But I think lately Ferrari has been better at developing the car, and so I have a little bit more faith in them. They were the second fastest car for a lot of the races in 2023, so I think if they are able to take what was working well on their cars and fix what wasn't working, hopefully they'll be able to come up with a concept that is good enough for P3. And then in P2, I have McLaren. I think McLaren are definitely on a huge upswing, and the number one reason why I have them finishing here is out of all of the teams except for Red Bull, they seem to understand their car the best, and for that reason understand how to develop it throughout the season. And so I think they will be able to do the best in 2024 for this reason. I also think that they will have stronger reliability and less driver errors than Ferrari, which is why they will finish ahead of them. And in number one, I'm going to have Red Bull. I think this will be a tighter gap than it was in 2023. I think Max will not be able to win the championship on his own in 2024, but I think their car is just too good for them not to win, even if they have a driver swap partway through the year. So that was my Constructors predictions. So now I will get to my hot takes. And my first hot take is the one that was obvious from my driver's standings, and that is that I think that Sergio Perez will be replaced by Daniel Ricciardo halfway through the season, and Liam Lawson will take Daniel's spot at Racing Bulls. I think Checo will be completely dropped. I think he will leave Red Bull and decide not to go back to Racing Bulls. I think he will take the rest of the year off to recuperate, spend some time with his family, and then maybe find a spot for 2024. But Checo struggled so much in 2023, and I don't see a reason why he will improve going into 2024 unless the car is developed in his direction, and that will never happen when Max Verstappen is in the other car. I also think that Daniel would have replaced him if Daniel hadn't got injured. I think if Daniel had gotten the entire second half of the season last year to really show his stuff and didn't suffer from the injury, he would have been strong enough to take Checo's seat from him. But I think they'll give Checo a few races into 2024, and if he isn't up to snuff, I think they will replace him. My second hot take prediction is that I think that Racing Bulls will get a podium in 2024. I think this will likely be Daniel, which will be why that Red Bull decide to swap him and Checo, but I think Yuki has equally as much of an opportunity to get a podium, and there are a few tracks that Yuki seems to be very good at. mainly Baku and Abu Dhabi at the end of the year, and I think Bahrain as well. He's quite good, and so I think Yuki will be able to do something special somewhere. Or Daniel will do it in Mexico if he doesn't replace Sergio, or maybe early on at Monaco, because if Daniel is comfortable with that car, I could see him putting on a glorious show at Monaco because he's proven to be extremely quick around there in the past. And then my third hot take is that I think both McLaren drivers will get a Grand Prix win in 2024. I think it is beyond due for Lando. He should have won in Sochi in 2021. And he could have won several races in 2023 if Max's car decided to break down. So I think he is due for a race win. Oscar, I think he has some races that he is quite strong at, and so I think on occasion he will be able to get ahead of Lando, and if that's the case, then he has just as much of an opportunity to win a race as Lando does. So those are my predictions for the 2024 F1 season. Let me know what your predictions are in the comments down below, and be sure to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this content. I'm very excited for the start of the 2024 season, and I'm hoping that some of these predictions come true, because then things will get quite spicy for the 2024 season.